The overthinking mind does not always want truth. Often, it wants permission to feel safe. It can sit in an ordinary room and turn one sentence into a maze. It can examine a pause, a look, a reply, a silence, until the mind is no longer seeking clarity, but walking a worn path it has walked too many times before. The ground becomes deeper each time. One thought calls another. One imagined problem demands one more imagined solution. From the outside, nothing moves. Inside, the mind is already tired. The Buddha did not teach that thinking is the enemy. Clear thought can guide speech, repair harm, and choose a wholesome next step. But he pointed again and again to a deeper danger. The mind suffers when it clings, when it thirsts, when it turns a passing movement into something it must obey. Overthinking is not simply having many thoughts. It is the mind trying to control pain by multiplying stories. The overthinking mind is not always searching for answers. Sometimes it is walking the same path because the path feels safer than open ground. So the real question is not, how do I stop thinking? It is, what is this mind trying to protect, and what kind of suffering does that protection keep creating? Overthinking usually begins with the hope that one more thought will finally bring peace. A person opens a small notebook after a difficult conversation. The page is half filled with crossed-out sentences. The same line has been written 3 different ways, then scratched through until the paper feels thin beneath the pen. What did they mean by that pause? Why did their voice change at the end? Should I have answered differently? Maybe I sounded weak. Maybe I said too much. Maybe I ruined something that cannot be repaired. Nothing new is being discovered. But the mind keeps circling. This is one of the quiet traps of overthinking. It feels productive because it is active. It feels like investigation. It feels like care. It feels like intelligence. But much of the time, it is not wisdom. It is anxiety pacing inside the shape of intelligence. The Buddha's path does not criticize thinking itself. Clear thought has a place. Reflection has a place. Wise attention has a place. The problem begins when thought is no longer serving understanding. It is serving fear. The mind repeats because it believes repetition will create certainty. It keeps turning the same moment over, hoping the next turn will reveal the one answer that makes uncertainty disappear. But conditioned life does not become certain because the mind demands it. Sometimes the thought is not looking for truth. It is looking for control. It wants a guarantee before speaking. It wants proof before resting. It wants the future to sign a contract. The body may already be tired, the eyes dry, the pen still in the hand, but the mind says, keep going. The answer is almost here. I know that movement. I have entered real conversations already exhausted by the imaginary ones. I have mistaken a night of mental rehearsal for responsibility, then wondered why my heart felt less kind in the morning. The strange pain of overthinking is that it promises protection while quietly spending the strength we needed for the real moment. In early Buddhist practice, the question is not only whether a thought is true, it is also whether attending to it again and again leads towards suffering or away from suffering. Some thoughts are useful once. After that, they become fuel. A memory can be remembered without being worshipped. A concern can be noticed without being obeyed. A possibility can be considered without being turned into a prison. The first shift is simple, but not easy. See the difference between wise reflection and mental chewing. Wise reflection clarifies the next wholesome step. Overthinking keeps the wound open, so the mind can keep touching it. Wise reflection has humility. It knows what can be known and what cannot. Overthinking wants to force life to become fully controllable. That is why the Buddha's teaching asks us to return to direct knowing. What is here now? A pen mark pressed too deep. A page that has stopped giving answers. A mind walking the same sentence until the ground beneath it is no longer flat, a dry mouth. A wish for certainty, a fear of being wrong. When these are seen plainly, the mind is no longer completely lost inside its own commentary. Overthinking says, think one more time, and you may finally be safe. Wisdom asks, is this thought leading to release, or is it deepening the path I keep walking in pain? That question begins to change the ground under the feet. A thought by itself can be light. It appears, it is known, and it passes. The problem is not that the mind produces images, words, memories, plans, and questions. This is part of being human. The problem begins when craving leans into the thought and says, this must give me something. This must protect me. This must become certain before I can relax. Then the thought becomes heavier. You may notice it in the body before you notice it in the mind. The shoulders rise while you rewrite the same message for the 5th time. The jaw holds a small pressure. The thumb deletes a sentence, types it again, deletes it again. There is no emergency in the room, yet the nervous system behaves as if the next wording might decide your whole life. This is where the Buddha's teaching on craving becomes very practical. Craving is not only desire for pleasure, it is also the thirst for things to be other than they are. It is the thirst for uncertainty to vanish, for the past to become editable, for the future to become visible before we take one more step. It is the thirst for the self to be protected from all possible blame. Overthinking is often craving in a mental form. The mind does not cling to the thought because the thought is peaceful. It clings because the thought gives fear a job to do. It says, I need to know exactly what will happen. It says, I need to make sure no one misunderstands me. It says, I need to find the perfect explanation so I never feel this discomfort again. The thought may sound reasonable, but underneath, the thirst is not peaceful. It is burning quietly. This does not mean every plan is craving. To plan wisely is part of responsible life. You can prepare for a conversation, learn from a mistake, consider consequences, and choose careful action. But there is a different flavor when craving enters. The mind does not feel clearer after thinking. It feels more dependent on thinking. It cannot put the question down. It cannot let the sentence rest for even one breath. I have seen how easily concern becomes compulsion. At first, I am trying to understand. Then, I am trying to guarantee. Then I am trying to erase the vulnerability of being alive, and that cannot be done by thought. In the Buddha's teaching, suffering grows when feeling conditions craving, and craving conditions clinging. Overthinking often follows that pattern. An unpleasant feeling arises: embarrassment, fear, loneliness, doubt. Instead of knowing it simply as unpleasant feeling, the mind wants it gone. So it thinks. Then it clings to the thinking as the solution. The thought becomes a tangled thread. The harder the mind pulls, the tighter the knot becomes. After enough pulling, even the knot begins to look like a road the mind knows how to walk. The practice is not to attack thought. Attacking thought is still another form of struggle. The practice is to notice the thirst underneath it. When the mind begins its loop, ask quietly, what am I wanting this thought to do for me? Am I asking it to remove uncertainty? Am I asking it to protect an image of myself? Am I asking it to make someone else's heart controllable? That question brings the Dhamma into the middle of the loop. A thought says, replay the conversation. Craving says, if you replay it enough, you may escape the feeling. Mindfulness says, unpleasant feeling is here. Wanting certainty is here. The loop is here. Once craving is seen as craving, the thought loses some of its authority. It may still return. But now it is not a sacred command. It is something built from causes, not a voice that deserves the throne. It is leaning toward relief, asking for more fuel, inviting the feet back onto the old path. And when the thirst beneath thinking is seen, the next layer becomes visible. The mind is not only seeking answers, it is trying to build a safer self. Overthinking does not only create stress, it can create an identity. The mind begins with a question, but soon it becomes a person. The explainer, the preventer, the one who must not be blamed, the one who must understand everything before resting, the one who can never be misunderstood, the one who believes that if they stop thinking, everything will fall apart. This self can feel responsible. It can even feel moral, but it is heavy to carry. A person may stand in a quiet kitchen, washing a bowl under running water, while the mind is nowhere near the water. It is defending itself in an imagined conversation. It is preparing explanations for accusations that have not been made. It is editing yesterday, rehearsing tomorrow, correcting a version of itself that exists only in thought. The hands are touching the bowl. The mind is touching a self-image. The Buddha's teaching on non-self is helpful here, but only if we understand it gently. Non-self does not mean nothing is happening. It does not mean your thoughts do not matter or that your pain is imaginary. It means the overthinking self is not a solid owner sitting behind the mind. It is being assembled moment by moment. One fear, one memory, one imagined accusation, one tightening in the body, one sentence that sounds like me because it has been repeated for years. Overthinking hides this assembly by making it feel solid. A thought appears, maybe I failed. A feeling answers, fear. Memory brings examples. Perception colors the present. The body tightens. Then the mind says, this is me. I am the kind of person who ruins things. The suffering deepens when the thought is not only believed, but owned. This is why overthinking is so exhausting. You are not merely solving a problem. You are defending a self that thought has built. Every possible mistake feels like a threat to that self. Every uncertain reply feels like evidence. Every silence feels personal. The mind does not simply think. It gathers thoughts into a small courtroom and places me at the center of every case. I have believed thoughts because they sounded like my own voice. That made them feel intimate, almost trustworthy. But a familiar voice is not the same as truth. Some thoughts are only old habits speaking fluently. Some thoughts are only fear wearing my accent. The Dhamma invites a different relationship. Instead of saying, I am overthinking, try seeing more precisely. Thinking is happening. Fear is present. The wish to protect an image is present. The body is tight. The mind is building a self out of this. That small change matters. When thought is known as thought, the owner becomes less solid. You do not have to become every sentence the mind produces. You do not have to defend every fear as if it were your deepest wisdom. You do not have to build a whole identity from a passing mental formation. This is not indifference. It is intimacy without possession. You are close enough to know the thought clearly, but not so entangled that the thought becomes your name. The bowl in the sink can be felt again. The water is cool over the fingers. The breath is short, then known. The thought continues, but now it is seen moving. It is not a king. It is not a judge. It is not the whole person. It is an event in the mind. When the self built from thinking begins to soften, practice becomes less about silencing the mind and more about not being governed by every movement that appears inside it. Many people try to stop overthinking by fighting thoughts. They command the mind to be quiet. They shame themselves for not being peaceful. They turn meditation into another battlefield, sitting with a straight back while inside they are arguing with every image, every sentence, every memory. The room is still, but the mind is full of pushing. This is another form of overthinking. Now the original thought has a second layer. Why am I still thinking? Why can't I be calm? Am I bad at practice? Maybe I am too broken for this. The attempt to silence the mind becomes one more loop. The Buddha's path offers something more exact than force. Mindfulness is not the act of winning an argument against thoughts. It is the act of knowing what is present without immediately becoming it, feeding it, or hating it. Mindfulness does not cross-examine the thought until it confesses. It does not demand a perfect explanation from fear. It simply notices, this is planning, this is shame, this is the wish to be safe. This is the old path asking for another step. This knowing is quiet, but it is not passive. It interrupts ignorance by making the movement of the mind visible. Before, the thought pulled you into its world. Now the thought is seen before it becomes the whole room. It may still be unpleasant. It may still repeat, but it is no longer completely hidden. The overthinking mind often feels ashamed of its own loops. It knows the page has stopped helping. It knows the message has been rewritten too many times, but shame does not free it. Shame only adds another voice to the room. Imagine standing at a sink after midnight. The plate is already clean, but the hand keeps moving, the cloth around the same circle. The mind begins again. What should I have done? What if they think badly of me? What if this never changes? The old loop has returned. But instead of entering the whole story, you feel the body. The forehead is tense. The stomach is tight. The breath is sitting high in the chest. The plate is smooth under the fingers. This is not failure. This is the place of practice. Mindfulness returns thinking to the body, not because the body is magical, but because the body is immediate. The body does not argue about next year. It shows the pressure of this moment. Tightness, heat, restlessness, fatigue, wanting. Knowing these directly cuts through some of the story's spell. Wise practice does not say, I must have no thoughts. It says, let me know this thought as thought. That difference is merciful. When the mind is restless, the first skillful step may be as small as naming, planning, remembering, fearing, judging, wanting. Not as a technique to make the thoughts vanish, but as a way to stop drowning in their content. A wave may still move, but you no longer have to become the wave. I have often wanted mindfulness to feel soft immediately. Sometimes it does not. Sometimes it feels like watching how much the mind resists being simple. But that honest seeing is already part of the path. A restless mind, known clearly, is closer to freedom than a restless mind believed completely. Do not turn mindfulness into another demand for perfection. The point is not to produce a blank mind. A blank mind is not the goal of the Buddha's teaching. The point is to know arising and passing, to see the thought appear, to see the thirst that feeds it, to see the body carry it, to see that it changes. The mind does not need another argument. It needs to see the path it keeps walking. And when that seeing becomes steady enough, overthinking reveals something important. Many loops continue because we confuse control with care. Overthinking often wears the mask of responsibility. It says, "I am only trying to do the right thing." It says, "I care too much." It says, "I just want to be prepared." And sometimes that is true. But sometimes care has quietly turned into control, and control has quietly turned into suffering. There is a difference between reading a map and trying to walk every possible road before sunrise. Care acts where action is possible. Control tries to command what depends on many conditions. Care writes the message clearly, then lets the other person receive it in their own mind. Control writes the message 10 times, then imagines every possible reaction, then suffers before anything has happened. Care prepares for tomorrow. Control tries to live tomorrow in advance, so nothing can surprise it. The body can feel the difference. Care has steadiness in it, even when it is serious. Control has a hidden panic. It tightens the chest. It narrows the eyes. It makes rest feel irresponsible. In the early Buddhist teachings, right effort is not frantic effort. It is skillful effort. It knows what to abandon, what to prevent, what to cultivate, and what to maintain. This is very different from trying to manage every outcome through thought. Right effort asks for wise energy. Overthinking spends energy without wisdom. A person may lie awake, planning a conversation that cannot happen until morning. The room is dark, but not dramatic. The clock shows 2:13. The body needs sleep. The mind insists that rehearsal is care. But by morning, the heart is already tired, the patience already thin, the speech already charged. What looked like preparation has planted agitation. This is how control harms what it claims to protect. The saddest part is that control often makes us less able to care. By the time the real moment arrives, the mind has already spent its patience on imagined versions of it. I have called control being careful because careful sounded kind. But there are times when the most careful thing is to stop adding fear to the mind, to write down the one action that is actually needed, to leave the rest, to let the body sleep, to admit, I cannot solve another person's perception tonight. This is not laziness. It is seeing conditions clearly. The Buddha's path trains us to distinguish what is ours to cultivate from what is not ours to command. Our intention is ours to watch. Our speech is ours to shape. Our action is ours to choose. But the reactions of others, the full future, the entire past, the hidden movements of every situation, these do not become controllable because the mind refuses to rest. Overthinking grows when the mind takes responsibility for what it cannot govern, then blames itself for being unable to govern it. So the practice becomes very ordinary. Ask, what is the next wholesome action available? Not the perfect action. Not the action that guarantees peace, just the next action, rooted in non-harming, honesty, patience, or clarity. Do that, then stop feeding the loop as if more mental noise could replace trust in practice. A map is useful when it helps the feet choose a direction. It becomes suffering when the mind refuses to step because it wants every road already walked. A conversation does not become wise because fear rehearsed it 100 times. A life does not become safer because the mind has suffered every imagined outcome in advance. Care takes the next step. Control tries to own the whole road. And when this difference is understood, a new kind of simplicity becomes possible. Not the end of thought, but the end of obeying thought as master. Letting a thought pass can feel strangely unsafe at first. The mind says, if you do not follow this, you will miss something important. It says, if you stop now, you are being careless. It says, if you let this go, the problem will win. Overthinking survives by making release feel dangerous, so the first moment of letting go may not feel peaceful. It may feel like standing at the edge of a familiar path and not taking the next step. The ground is quiet, the old road is clear, the mind knows exactly how to suffer there. Not following it can feel almost lonely, but this is where practice becomes training. Letting go in the Buddha's teaching is not throwing away responsibility. It is not pretending the issue does not matter, it is not becoming numb. It is the careful refusal to keep feeding what has already been understood. It is knowing when thought has completed its useful work and craving is now wearing its clothes. A thought comes. What if they misunderstood me? You check whether any wholesome action is needed. Maybe an apology is needed. Maybe a clarification is needed. Maybe silence is wiser. If action is needed, you act. If no action is possible now, the practice is to stop paying tribute to the loop. That choice may look invisible from the outside. No one sees the moment you do not reopen the inner courtroom. No one hears the accusation you decide not to rehearse. No one applauds when you let a frightening possibility pass without building a future around it. But the mind receives the training. This is where karma becomes intimate and practical. Not as punishment, not as a hidden verdict. Karma is intention taking shape. Each time the mind repeats resentment, resentment becomes more available. Each time the mind follows fear into another hour of rehearsal, fear becomes more familiar. And each time the mind knows a thought without feeding it, a different path is being worn into the ground. Not dramatically, quietly. The Buddha's path points toward abandoning unwholesome states and cultivating wholesome ones. In daily life, this can be as small as refusing to continue an inner argument that only strengthens anger. It can be choosing a sentence of honesty instead of another hour of mental rehearsal. It can be letting the body rest even while the mind claims there is still danger to solve. I have learned that some thoughts do not need an answer. They need less authority. This is difficult because the thinking mind wants to be treated as the wise elder in the room. Sometimes it is not. Sometimes it is a frightened messenger repeating the same warning long after the fire has gone out. We can thank the mind for trying to protect us without letting it lead the whole life. Letting a thought pass is not an act of violence against the mind. It is an act of trust in clear seeing. You are not destroying the thought. You are refusing to build a house around it. Feel the feet on the floor. Put the phone face down if it is feeding the loop. Close the notebook if the page has stopped teaching you. Let the mind say its sentence without kneeling before it. It may return. Let it be known again. Not with hatred, not with drama, just with patient recognition, thinking. This repeated recognition is not glamorous, but much of the path is not glamorous. It is the humble training of not giving the old habit the same food. A thought appears. It asks for the old road. It is known. It changes. Another appears. It is known. The body breathes. The floor holds the feet. The world remains wider than the loop. This is the quiet discipline that weakens overthinking. Not suppression, not indulgence, but repeated non-feeding. Each time you do not follow the thought into another hour of suffering, the ground changes slightly beneath the habit. The loop does not weaken because you win the argument. It weakens because, for once, you do not attend the trial. The old path is not erased in one moment, but it begins to weaken each time the mind sees the loop and does not take another step. And sometimes that is enough for wisdom to enter. Overthinking does not end because the mind is forced into silence. It begins to loosen when you see what the thinking is trying to do. Some thoughts are asking for wise action. Listen to them. Some thoughts are asking for care. Offer it. But some thoughts have already finished their work, and now they are only asking for more of your life. When that happens, do not reopen the inner courtroom after the case is ended. Do not keep walking the same mental road only because the ground is familiar. Pause where you are. Feel the body that has been carrying the loop. The forehead, the throat, the small pressure behind the ribs. Ask gently, is there a wholesome action to take, or is this only the old craving for certainty? If there is an action, take it with care. If there is no action, step off the worn path. Not dramatically, just one honest breath where the thought is allowed to be a thought and not a command. One moment where the mind does not have to build a future out of fear. One moment where knowing is enough. I know how convincing the old path can feel when the heart is afraid. Write this in the comments. I will not give this thought another hour of my life. Then let the next breath be the first step sideways, not forward into the old track, not backward into blame, sideways into the room that was here before the loop began. The path is old, but the next step is still yours. Practice with one thought today. Not all thoughts, just one. Let it arrive. Let it be known. Let it pass without giving it the whole house. Close the notebook when the page has finished teaching. Let the hands rest. Let the breath return. Let the next step be simple.